there's a beautiful book called Mastery, which I read years ago by George Leonard, and he talks about the same thing, and it really helped me. He talks about 3 types of people, of learners. They're what he calls the dabblers, the hackers, and the masters. And the dabblers, he says, are people that they find out about something and they get really excited about it. So like they just discovered tennis, and so they go and they buy, if they're wealthy, they buy the best tennis racket. They get the or you see these kind of guys on the bikes with all this, I mean, they think they're like, you know, who's the biker, famous guy? What's his name? Huh? Lance Armstrong. Yeah, you see them all over, these guys, you know, Lance Armstrong wannabes. You know, they've got the shirt, even with the corporate sponsors, you know, and they, you know, he's out there with his pot belly just on the weekend, but he's like, it's, you know. So you have dabblers that get into something, they get really excited. Oh, you can't believe what I discovered, and oh, I'm taking lessons. And then a couple weeks into it, maybe a couple months, it's not happening. So you say, hey, how's that tennis going? How are those lessons? They say, yeah, no, I gave it up. But I can't wait to tell you about the latest thing you know, and then he's into another thing, right? So that's the kind of, you know, the dabbler. And then there's the hackers. And these are people that learn to do something to a certain degree of skill, right? So they get reasonably good at something, different levels of it. Amateur people that just, you know, they have the same game, they go out and they play, they enjoy it, and they've learned a certain level, like a golfer who golfs about 90 every time. It's just, you know, they're hackers. Then he says there's the masters. And he said the master is not somebody who's mastered something. He's somebody that's committed to continual improvement. You see, now many of us are dabblers in spirituality. Many of us are hackers in our prayer. We're hackers. We've gotten to a certain level. You know, we know how to pray. We Allahu Akbar. We go through. But the master is somebody who wants more presence every time they pray. They're committed to constant improvement in their practice. When they read, they want to become better readers. They want to have more understanding. And this is, you know, this is the path of mastery. So he talks about the learning plateau. So what happens when you first begin to do something that you haven't done before? Initially, you're going to see improvement. Like when I learned to type, you know, you get to a certain level and you get really, you increase pretty quick. But then you hit what's called a learning plateau. And then things just stop. And it becomes, actually, it's difficult because you're just not improving. And so you feel like a lot of people will give up. The dabbler will give up at that point. The hacker will wait it through, and then they'll move to the next plateau. Now, what they discovered about learning plateaus is these are actually the periods when you're learning. This is even though it's the most difficult time, you're learning during this time. And that's where the jump comes from. Do you see? So, and exercise is like that. You know, you'll start exercising. Initially, you'll start seeing changes in your body, but then it stops. And then it's like a couple months and nothing and then something changes, right? It's the same thing. Everything's like that. These are the sunan in creation. And so the rule that every bit of practice makes a little more perfect appears to break down in these learning plateaus. The learner gets off the plateau and starts to climb again. The curve which records his achievements again shows steady progress from day to day. Plateaus are not found in all learning curves, but only in those which record progress in gaining a complex skill. All right? So now this is, I mean, I just really think this is so amazing because there's so much in this statement, so I really want you to think deeply about this here. Knowing that the plateaus in learning are periods of hidden progress may prevent discouragement. So when you're feeling like, no, I'm not going anywhere, knowing this, that you're on a learning plateau, will keep you going. Persevere. Keep pressing on. Just keep going. Because you're going to have that jump again. Like in your Arabic, you know, I'm just doing this thing and it's just not happening. And then one day, suddenly something clicks. And let me tell you something, this is the God's honest truth. I read certain books for years and it just suddenly something clicked with it. You know, I would just read them, and sometimes I actually thought I was understanding them. But certain books, they just clicked for me. Writers, they just, you know, there's certain writers that are really difficult in the Arabic tradition that I just found easy to read, but it didn't come immediate. It was hard work. And that's what you have to remember, that this really is hard stuff. So now the beauty of the beginner's mind in Zen, you know, the Zen have a tradition about the beginner's mind. The beauty of the beginner's mind is that the beginner is very conscious of everything when they're first learning something. And that's why a lot of people are self-conscious. And that's why you'll never learn to speak a language if you're self-conscious. I mean, when I first learned Arabic, I would talk to any Arab, and I didn't care how I sounded. I really wanted to learn the language. You have to be willing to make those mistakes. But if you've got that, you know, I don't want to look silly, or I don't want to make those mistakes, you just won't learn. So being willing to make mistakes. When you read, you're going to make mistakes in reading Arabic. You can't care. You just read. It doesn't matter. That's how you're going to learn.